Welcome everybody to our webinar today. Super excited to have such a large number of people joining us for this webinar. In terms of our intent for the day, it really is to address that inner workings, the mindset, the leadership mindset and the emotional states in the crisis that we're all facing right now. And I'm really excited that we've got a fantastic panel of coaches and leadership development, deeply experienced leadership development specialists in the room with us today. We get a chance to lean into their experiences, their thoughts, their ideas on this whole topic in this area. Now, through this webinar, a key part of this is your interaction. And while we've got a huge number of people that have joined us, which is absolutely fantastic, as you can probably expect, having anybody come in live would be a little bit of a challenge. So what we have, we want you to ask questions, please. Bring in your thoughts, your ideas, your questions. And there you will find on your chat box there is an opportunity to post questions there. Please don't use the chat box, use that for logistics, use the questions box. We have a team of people that are looking through the questions and are making sure that we pick out as many of those as possible today to get those addressed. So please participate and ask us those questions. So I guess as part of our quick introduction today, really, is just let me set the scene. My name is Nick Woodthorpe, and I'm Managing Director of WWA Corporate Coaching. The organization that we have here in the region has now been established for over 15 years. We've got over 40 specialist coaches that work with us, all certified and deeply experienced across the region and beyond. And I'm happy to say that obviously the coaches in the room today do work with us, but with over 40 coaches, we cover a huge amount of space. We're a specialist organization, so coaching is what we do. And with that experience in region, we're here to be of service as we are today with this webinar. What I want to do is to introduce our panel because we want to get into the questions as soon as possible. And so if I may just set the scene in terms of who we have in the room today. So thank you all for being here. Let me introduce you first, Pia, if I may. Pia has extensive leadership and strategic and consultative experience across the Middle East with 12 years in Dubai. She is highly skilled in executive and leadership coaching and coaching teams in culturally diverse and challenging situations. Her philosophy is that leaders with high emotional intelligence and empathy can lead others in rough times and modern adversity. Welcome, Pia. Thank you for joining us today. Tim is a London-based leadership consultant and executive coach who has worked internationally for 25 years at Nestlé, Mondelez, Wrigley's, and more recently in private equity. And in the past 10 years has held roles at CEO level, COO, and managing director. He specializes in executive coaching at senior levels globally and brings a wealth of international commercial experience in helping those leaders navigate the stormy waters that we're currently experiencing. He also works on a number of boards across the world. So thank you, Tim. Great to have you here too. Cameron Tork. Cameron, an experienced professional executive coach, again, across the region for many years and operates, as most of our coaches do, at PCC level. He focuses on executive coaching and leadership development with multinationals and large business schools, international business schools across the region. He has a deep interest in emotional intelligence and mindfulness practice, inside-out leadership. So great to have you here, Cameron. Thank you very much. And Ihab Badawi, a master certified coach with a key focus on supporting organizations and executives in developing the right leadership mindset required during their journey of leading and managing change dynamics. He has enjoyed 22 years of corporate experience leading operations in MEA, Indian subcontinent, Asiana, and China. He now leads up a consultancy and talent development firm and is head of Coach Masters Academy in the Middle East. He's also based in Lebanon, so we're excited to have him here with us today. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to cut pretty much straight into the first question, if I may. So we have some questions that we have sourced from leaders around this region, and we want to pop those in while you're just warming up and putting some questions together. So our first question today is, the first point is, I'm facing complete uncertainty in my role, as are many others I currently lead. What insights, tools can you offer to assist? If I may, I'm going to reach out to maybe Pia to start us off, and love to hear your thoughts, Pia, on that particular point.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That is actually a question that I'm getting from a lot of peers, friends, colleagues, and clients. Right now, we are in an unprecedented crisis globally. And the one thing that makes us feel safe is our employment or company or business. Whether we are, in our own business or we work for a corporation, that security is one of the basic needs, like food and shelter. And so it's only natural that people are feeling complete uncertainty, anxiety, fear, probably even panic. And I think I want to speak to the fact that it's okay to have these emotions, both as employees and also as leaders. These emotions come up to guide us, and they have messages and gifts for us to take some type of action. So they're very needed. This anxiety is a very needed emotion. It helps us actually organize and plan for the tasks that are ahead, so it keeps us focused. So what's top of my mind right now is that as a leader, the best thing you can do is to keep reassuring your employees that everybody's going through this. You're not alone. And if you collaborate and come up with, brainstorming solutions and listen to everybody, you can get through this a lot better than if you sit and just feel the anxiety by yourself.
Great, thanks, Pia. Maybe Ihab, you could give us your thoughts on that particular point as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Pia. Well, actually, in the recent few years, you can see that lots of uncertainty is actually surrounding many jobs and many industries, actually, for the speed of the technology that it's going through, and the changing global economy, like it's impacting governments and different sectors. Possibly the latest incidents have actually speeded the process. So I would say uncertainty, the best thing to look at it as a kind of a trigger for us to shake whoever has hit complacency at one point of time, or to hit the creativity actually, or ignite creativity within us. And I believe it's the right time for us now to rethink the future from a positive sense, not to downplay what we are all going through. We have talked a little bit, Nick, before about how it's impacting our industry, but the idea is that try to use it in a positive sense to see what you can do to re-trigger your potential, to re-trigger your career into the future. And I would conclude it with two things. Learn as much as we can during this period so that we can have a plan and a strategy. As a personal plan, also as a personal development plan towards what we see the kind of future is going to be and how we can be best prepared for it.
Great, thank you, Ihab. Maybe Tim, I can just pass that over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Thanks very much, Ihab. I mean, and Pia, what was going through my mind as I was thinking about that question was how some of the clients that I'm working with at the moment, how they're responding. And I think the answer to that is differently to this challenge, because we're all facing a very similar challenge in that things are much more uncertain and unplanned, and they're changing on an hour by hour, minute by minute basis. So to some extent, rigid formulas are not the solution, because things are moving at such a fast pace. We need to be adapting. So whilst we try and balance that slight chaos that's going on for all of us at the moment, it's thinking about one of the things that we work with is having a secure base. So when there's a storm raging outside, you know, what are the elements? And you know, for me, you know, there are three kind of key elements to that secure base. One is, you know, my work side. Is my work under control? And for many people at the moment, no, it isn't under control. And no matter how many strategic plans you write, it's unlikely to be under control in the near future. So sort of that side is wobbling. The other parts of this triangle would be things like your you know, your mental and physical health. Those are things that you know, there are tools to work on. There are many online possibilities. Practicing gratefulness, doing something for your physical health. Those things are all part and parcel of things that can calm you, can help you, you know, build towards your secure base. And then the third element is really your home and family. So I've been talking to two chief execs this week who are really in very chaotic situations. One's in the you know, super premium automobile sector, and their business is completely turned upside down. They can't get the parts they need. Their sales are completely dried up. You know, all kinds of things going on in terms of their organization at the moment. And, you know, the focus that they're trying to get is on their home and family. So if I'm working from home now and I'm used to flying around all around the world as a chief executive, what can I do to connect with my family, with my wife, with my kids, with my you know, support network within the family? And that can bring a lot of calmness and feeling of something positive that's going on in my life that I can control. So I think it's maybe a long answer to that question, but looking at those three areas again, which is your mental and physical health, you know, your work environment, what, you know, working with what you can change or can influence and not worrying too much about what you can't. And the third one is your home and family, getting some feelings of gratitude and enjoyment from that.
Great, thank you, Tim. Cameron, just yeah, your insights on that particular question, that point. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Nick. Thank you, coaches. I would like to look at this from a different perspective. As you know, we live in a VUCA world. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity is going to be with us. It's not something that is going to come and go. So it's an invitation to train our mind. Our default habitual mind is not trained and is not capable of working with these difficulties. As Einstein says, no problem can be solved from the level of the consciousness that has created it. So as I see it, is for us to work with our mind, train our mind to be more present, take care of what is available and controllable, and not to fall into brooding on that which is out of our hand. That initiates worry, fear, anxiety, and if we are worried, fearful, and anxious, our concentration will go down. And if the concentration goes down, our problem-solving ability will be negatively impacted.
Great. Thanks very much, Cameron. So let me pose another question out to you then as well. We are getting some questions through. Please don't be afraid to throw out some challenging questions. We know that it is tough out there right now, and we want to understand what are the challenges that you are facing in this moment at this time. That's what today is about. So please feel free to put those into the questions to us. In the meantime, here we are. I'm not sure I will have a job in the coming months. I'm deeply worried about how the future looks and how to move forward. How can I address this situation? So this, you know, as always, we're talking about the inner game here, right? There's a lot of stress, a lot of worry in the market. And, you know, just the other day, I was speaking to one of our clients, and they had just done a survey across a very large part of the organization in the Middle East. And they had then 40% of the respondees came back with either stressed or very stressed. So here we are. This is probably adding into that point of stress. So maybe Cameron, I could start with you on this one.
Yes, thank you. As I'm reading and as I listen to you, it's I deeply worried about the future. One of the qualities of the habitual mind is loves to go into the future. And if it goes into the future, if it is hijacked into the future, it will feel fear, worry, anxiousness. You cannot have fear, worry, anxiousness unless your mind is in the future. Try it and see. And at the same time, we can feel sadness, sorrow, and regret if the mind has not hijacked it to the past. So the first step is self-leadership, self-awareness, to be aware when the mind hijacks it to the future. There is nothing wrong thinking about the future, planning about the future. That's absolutely necessary. However, research shows 50% of the times at work, our mind is time traveling to the future, to the past. And these have consequences, emotional consequences, which also affects our focus and attention. So my first advice would be mindful when the mind hijacks you. And if you find that is not relevant, is not helpful, don't play that game. Come back to the present and the future, to what is at hand, or what you need to clarify with your senior management about job security and so on. Thank you.
Great, Cameron. And I'm hearing out in the marketplace in general is how do we look after ourselves? You know, and we're talking, you know, physical health, mental health, and so forth. And you know, on numerous occasions, I've heard the concept, you know, meditation as something that people are taking a look at, have maybe already in mindfulness, you being very much up on the mindfulness space. I guess you're talking about how do we remain present in the moment, in with what's going on, if that's correct. Maybe Pia, you've got some insights there as well.
Yeah, I really echo what Cameron was saying. Again, these are necessary emotions, but it's really important to not let them hijack you. What comes to my mind is to nourish your mind, body, soul, and spirit at this moment. Take this downtime rather than fearing and letting panic run amok. It is scary if you're going to have a job, if you're facing a job loss, but there are also opportunities in that, right? So there's a flip side to all of that. I guess I liken this time to taking care of yourself. Like the airlines are saying in their safety announcement, put your own oxygen mask on first, because you're not going to be good to anybody else unless you take care of yourself first. So it's a really good opportunity to practice mindfulness, but do it with some things that are going to build your skills. There are lots of free online courses. It doesn't have to be, you know, just working out or doing mental breathing. It can also be something that's going to give you something so that you are valuable and have a set of skills for when you then have to go and look for another job if you do lose your job, right? So you can upskill, you can learn new specializations, lots of free stuff out there, and you have to take care of yourself first and you know, build that repertoire before you can help your family and your friends and your loved ones. So I would focus on that, nourishing the body, mind, spirit, and soul, and take that as a learning period for yourself.
So understanding when we're in a triggered state and having the necessary tools and skills to acknowledge that and to work with it. Tim, I don't know what your leaders in that you're working with and how they're managing that level of, I guess, triggering or some level of hijacking in some respects.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of anxiety. And that's very natural. I think that, you know, one of the coping strategies that seems to be working well for people is being mindful, as we heard earlier, and trying to be more in the moment and less about what might happen or what, you know, if only I'd done this then in the past. And you know, there are different ways that we can bring this about, and certainly meditation's a great one. One that's actually happening at the moment. I'm locked down in my house with 6 of us. So usually there are a couple of us, and then my daughters are in and out. We've got my 2 cousins staying here now from London who've come down. We're all locked down, and we can't actually really go out very often. So we've converted the roof terrace into a yoga area outside. So we've now we've kind of converted that into a yoga area, and each of us has got some kind of challenge. So my nephew is doing an online challenge. You can do a month. It's like an app to try and do the splits, all right? And this is a tall, big guy who could hardly touch his toes. So he's practicing every day, right, to try and do this sort of ballet dancer split. And I have to say, after a week, he's getting closer, you know, and we're laughing about that. And
so taking on personal challenges then, Tim, right?
In terms of personal challenge. And I think that helps you just, take things step by step and be in the moment a little bit more and have some fun with that, because we can't control what's going on in the world at the moment.
No. You have thoughts on that? It's out of control. So how are we going to be with that? Did we ever have control?
Well, it's you can always try, but the good thing is that just to build on what have been said about this, definitely presencing is the key to be connected with the current moment, because definitely there is nothing we can do in the past events that have happened. And if we are going to manage anything in the future, the best thing that we can is to manage the present, and the actions that we do at this moment are going to construct what kind of future we are going to have. Now, once we have this this kind of mentality and acceptance, okay, this is where I would like to draw the concept of vulnerability. And for us to be present, first we have to open the gateway of being vulnerable. So we have to accept and give ourselves the permission that we are all vulnerable at this point of time, and there is no shame being a leader, being a head of an organization, or having a global team, or what have you of your responsibilities. The idea is that there is no shame for you to be worried, and it's a normal, I would say it's a normal period for all of us to have such feelings, and actually we need to accept them, embrace them. And I would say this is where we come to terms, and we can normalize such worries and de-stress a little bit. And then we can act on all of the great tips that have been shared, is to go with a kind of, with presencing by at least having meditation or mindfulness techniques, breathing techniques, yoga techniques. All of these areas allow us to just settle in and understand that our worry, we can use it to trigger us to start planning for the future. But the first thing is allow yourself to be vulnerable, and to allow ourselves to accept that, and allow ourselves to be able to engage our team with that such acceptance as well, because rest assured that all the team members are passing with the same kind of worry.
Absolutely. I mean, vulnerability, that's a topic in itself, which I will like to get to just in a moment. But actually, since we've got a huge number of people in the room with us today, I would like just to get a little insight into, I've got 3 quick questions for you. The last one really is leaning into the level of stress you're currently feeling right now. And I think that's a really interesting thing for us all to gauge in terms of who's in the room. So if you, I'm just going to launch a quick poll here. The first one is really where you're located. So let me launch that. If you could just fill that in for me quickly. Thank you. And just get a sense of where everybody is calling in from. Great. So let's quickly share those results. Okay, so clearly we've got a large number of people coming in from the UAE, a few in Saudi, GCC, and across the Middle East ultimately, and a little bit in in Europe as well. So the next question I've got really is what role are you playing within your organizations? So let's just get a little sense of where people are. Oh, one second, sorry, let me just relaunch that. My fault. Hopefully, looks like I pressed the wrong button there, but that's going to happen. It's all live, people. So let's not do that one. Let's go straight to the level of stress in the system. and that's that's ultimately the most important one. What are you feeling? You at the lower end at 0 to 2? Are you at the higher end, 3 to up to 9 to 10? Where are you sitting in terms of the level of concern and stress and worry that you currently are feeling at this present moment in time? Great. So let me think we've got everybody's responses now. Thank you. Let me just close that, and then let's just share those results. I think they're super interesting in terms of what we've got here, because would we normally have 10% and 25%? That's 35% of you are at pretty much at the very high end of worry and concern. And it's interesting because that ties very much, almost in a similar way into the organization I was telling you earlier, where 45% were stressed or very stressed. This is not a normal way for us to be operating. So I think that shows why we've got a huge number of people with us today online. What I guess, maybe that theme, I do have some questions here that I would like us to go to, if I may. Sorry, but I'm going to just pull them up for me so I can read them. So here's one from Deepak. Put this out to the team and feel free to answer it as you see fit. From the perspective of a leader and a coach, what approaches would you recommend to ensuring the engagement, commitment of employees during this time of uncertainty, where everybody is forced to do things that they do not normally do? So yeah, we're all being pushed into spaces that are uncomfortable. What would be some of the ideas that would pop up there from you coaches? Maybe Tim, you've got some thought there?
Yeah, could you just repeat the question, Nick, please?
For sure I can. From the perspective of a leader and a coach, what approaches would you recommend to ensure the engagement and commitment of employees during this time of uncertainty? So how do we help employees to lean into what's going on?
Thanks, Nick. I mean, many possible answers to that. So it just reflects a personal preference, probably of my experience or some clients that I've worked with. I think in times when things are really difficult or uncertain, it's really important to have meaning and purpose, and to know why why you're doing something, what you're fighting for, where are you going, and what's the meaning behind that. And there's a quotation that I love from the Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, who always says, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. And I often think about that, and when you think of people in an organization, part of the anxiety comes from not knowing what's going to happen, and maybe not being aligned particularly with what the company might do, because when the company's paying us well and life is good, we don't really question that, necessarily. However, having some purpose, some greater purpose behind what your organization does, apart from making money or gaining market share, is really important. So many companies that I go to, they have little signs outside saying these are our vision and values, and then when you actually talk to people in the organization, they don't really believe in that necessarily. The CEO or the main board has created this list, but the guy, the smallest guy who's cleaning the offices, really buy into that? Oftentimes the answer is no. So I think in these sort of circumstances, it becomes even more important to really have a clear purpose of why is the team together? What's the organization about? But what is my particular team with that organization? What are we trying to do? For me as a coach, many of my pieces of work at business schools have now been delayed or postponed into later in the year. So I have more time available in order to serve people. So what can I do with that? What's important for me from my own purpose in order to do good stuff with people who need support at the moment, supporting National Health Service workers here, key key health people and helping coach them, or work with people in organizations that are severely stretched that need us even more than ever. So that gives me a purpose and a meaning in what I do.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, purpose and meaning. Pia, you and I were connected earlier, and we were talking about this idea of simplifying, purpose. How do leaders get team behind a sense of purpose at this time to help them re-engage in what's going on? Because perhaps the bigger purpose now is lost in a much shorter term survival mindset, if you want. And yet organizations need to keep going. I mean, there is something that needs to be here. What do leaders need to be doing potentially? What are some of the things that they can offer, or how do they need to be at this point in terms of setting the tone for this?
Well, I think it's important, first of all, to remember that as a leader, you're not expected, and I don't for 1 minute in my experience believe that leaders are being expected to be superheroes or to be, the savior that's coming in and going to make it all nice and perfect by miracle. It's important to know that our leaders, the CEOs, down through the ranks of managers, we're all in the same boat. They all feel the same. The fact that they're a CEO doesn't make them less fearful or less scared. And it's really important for everybody to come together and to really be unified and to show empathy. So, it's okay to be the CEO and not have all the answers, but you can get those answers if you unify and everybody comes together and everybody's involved. So perhaps it's time for a CEO when they're facing lack of motivation and involvement and people don't feel valued, that he or she go out and say, you know what, I'm not going to hire a bunch of really expensive consultants outside to help me run my business in a crisis. I'm going to ask what you can offer inside, because everybody has their strengths, right? And everybody is willing to step up and say, I'm good at this, I'm good at communications, or I'm good at nurturing people, I'm good at arranging things, whether it's virtual company get-togethers or whatever it may be in this challenging time where we can't be together physically. There's lots of companies out there I know that are doing socials on Zoom, getting their teams together and just having drinks and food, and they're all on cam. They're in separate rooms, but they're together socially, visually. And so it's important to know that you're not alone here. And I think that in itself motivates people to a certain extent.
Great, thank you, Pia. I'm going to lean into another question for you, Cameron, if I can, and maybe you've got the point here. This is from Patrick. How would you guide and support a team member who is not handling self-isolation well? You can see it in the video calls, but when you ask them, they say everything's fine. So what's going on here? Somebody's not ready to show a level of vulnerability here. What is it the leader's role here to draw out something that needs to be said, I suspect, from that question?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I would say leaders set the tone. So I would wonder if the leader himself or herself is vulnerable and open. Self-awareness, managing his or her own emotions and sharing those. Sharing those emotions with others allows the others to also be vulnerable and open. So I would start with the leader. How am I feeling today? And this is where I'm coming from. And then asking the questions from the other person. How are you feeling? And that might be actually a great place to start for a deeper conversation. There might be issues, yes, obviously. And through that, picking up that sort of that thread, they can open up to more and more possibilities. That's how I see that.
Yeah, I like that, and the opportunity maybe just to park business for a moment and to talk more on a human-to-human level, right? This is, business is what goes on, no question about it. But unless we're able to engage with each other on a slightly different level than we have probably traditionally done, then can we have that level of connection, and do we allow that space of vulnerability? What are your thoughts, Ihab, on that as well?
Well, absolutely, Nick. What has been just said is absolutely the key, is to check in with ourselves and see what have we done in that area. But the point is, going back to the question, is how we can open the doors for such team members. And the idea is that it's our role is not to lead the business only, is to focus on the team and to take a step forward. So in one of our clients we were consulting for, is actually we open different forums within the organization. Instead of focusing on specific individuals, open forums to allow people to come and discuss collectively how they are dealing with the situation, what kind of things have worked for them. And actually we've worked a lot with the leaders, allowing them to chip in and to open up themselves, because they are considered to be role models within the organization. And when they see them opening up and being vulnerable in front of everyone, that allows the space for more trust, higher empathy across all members within the team. And as this opens up, definitely this will add value to the person to start possibly sharing and opening up. And possibly after that, the leader can lean into a possible one-to-one, which allows that person possibly to open up even more and put everything on the table and have a heart-to-heart discussion apart from the business and apart from the pressure of work. I've seen it work for the past 2 weeks with that organization, and we are duplicating the same in Saudi Arabia with another client. So far, everyone was busy with organizational goals and how we can shape up and deal with the kind of situation that we are in. But bit by bit, people are now understanding that we need to connect with the most important client and customer that we have, and which is our internal human capital within the organization. And I think Pia touched base on that. Unless you are healthy from the inside, you wouldn't be able to tackle anything on the outside and be ready. So it's time for us to connect personally, individually, internally, and also to deal internally with that body and that unity of the human capital as well.
Thank you, Ihab. And I have a question from Deepak, which kind of builds on that a little bit. And he says, is there a need to rethink priorities, organizational and on an organization level, on a business level, at this point of business disruption? So is there a need to rethink priorities, Tim, in terms of what organizations are doing inside?
Well, absolutely. I think, obviously, I don't know the business in question now, but you know, to use an analogy of a sailing boat, if you're sailing along in smooth waters, then the priority might be getting a suntan, all right? If a big storm's brewing and you've got huge waves, then clearly your priorities are going to be very different, like battening down the hatches, pulling in the sail, and everybody has a role to play in that. So I think with that analogy, you know, we are in a big storm at the moment. And so readjusting our priorities, and also I like the idea of people being able to step up. I think, Pia, you mentioned it, you know, what are my skills? What could I bring to this particular situation now that maybe I'm not usually doing? But in times of crisis or of major change, we certainly do need to look at our priorities and do that pretty quickly, because you know, organizations that are just trying to stick to the status quo of their command and control structure might get some benefit from, okay, we've got the captain on the ship and we know who the second in command is. Well, that's good, but to what a level are those people leaning into expertise and experience within the ship that they're on in order to help them through this difficult time? And I think it does require a different perspective, and you know, on a daily basis or a weekly basis, you know, what would usually be the management meeting or the exco looking at, these are the market shares for the last 3 months or the last year, or this is our, you know, our income from operations for the last month. We need to be looking more to the present, what's actually happening now, and how are we gonna flex and change perhaps our focus going forward. And that feedback needs to come from the team. So leaders that are able to engage, not just in, you do this because I'm the boss and this is how we've always done it, to more, okay, so So you're in victim mode. What do you think we should do? What would be your suggestions? What are your ideas and impulses? And those can be brought on board to be able to flex and create more creative solutions.
I hear that, and that creativity is something that obviously popped up a little bit earlier, is how do we have a very different type of conversation rather than a top-down. Now we are all in the same scenario. There is no real differentiation in terms of where you sit within the business. We're all facing the same scenario. So how do we engage in that different type of conversation? Peter, I've got a question for you from Jonathan. As leaders, there is a fine line between offering support to our teams, but when do we pass over? When do we pass this over to experts? Stress is one thing, so is anxiety. Where do leaders and managers draw the line to avoid being pop psychologists?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So my first thought is, as a leader, again, goes back to my previous comment. You're certainly not expected to be a superhero or a therapist or a psychiatrist or any of those roles that you would normally not take on. If you can show up to work and show your employees that you have a great sense of empathy, just being able to put yourself in their shoes, that's really all they're probably looking for. They're not looking for somebody to fix their problems. And I think that's probably where a lot of leaders tend to fall into that trap, that I must be the superhero, I must be there for everybody, I must fix this for them. It's my company, it's my responsibility, I'm the top dog. Don't fall into that trap, right? Because you are not there to solve all of the problems. You are there to get everybody to pitch in and to also just listen. If you can just actively listen and not begin to solve the problem, that's 90% there right away, because that's all people want. In a lot of situations, they don't expect you to go in and solve the problem. They just expect you to listen, a shoulder to cry on, somebody to hear them out, to have a voice. That's what most employees, and at least what I'm coming across in my clients, they just want somebody to hear that they have issues, that they have concerns, that they are afraid. They don't expect necessarily the CEO to resolve it or to be a psychiatrist.
Yeah, thank you, Pia. And Cameron, maybe that's worth expanding on a little bit, is this, how can we, to some degree, co-create in this environment? Because we're all in a state of a level of trigger and stress, and none of us have the answers at the end of the day. And there's a lot of stress on leadership. Certainly, probably puts it on itself to a large degree. Is that, oh, I must have the answers, but I don't have clarity. I don't have the answers. Therefore, what can I say?
Yeah. Well, that might not be a bad thing that we don't have the answers. It actually might help open up a conversation. Going back to the 360 assessments we share with most leaders before we engage coaching, there are two fundamental areas that leaders need to show up. One is obviously having impact, results, but the other side is the relating. They both need to exist together. It's like a bird needs to fly, needs to have both wings. In the same way, leaders need to perhaps engage a little bit more on the relating side at the moment because of the situations that we have, high emotions, strong emotions. And again, in one of the clients' meetings that I had, the first thing he starts the questioning with everybody is, how can we help you? How can the organization help you? Not how can I help you alone, but how can the organization support you and help you? So it doesn't have to be a solo event. No, not at all.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. On that idea of co-creation, any thoughts on that? How we can find ways to work, I guess, with more commonality versus, I'm meant to know more than you. I'm meant to have more clarity than you. So what happens in those situations when, as we say, that's no longer the case?
Absolutely. As I'm hearing you talking about this, and I think this is a great question, because in the past period, what we saw is deep and important requirement for all leaders to step up and become leader coaches. Okay, because as you know, one key component in leadership is to be a coach and a mentor. Now let's focus on being a coach, which answers the question that you posed, Nick. Is number one, coaches are supposed to have active listening and a high level of listening, and this is what will allow the communication to amplify with their team members, is actually listen to what they have to say and listen actively to connect, have high level of empathy to be able to draw that connection as well. And definitely within the coaching context, we are not supposed to know. That's a key component. The coach is not supposed to know what the topic is and where it is heading. Actually, it is to explore together. So if we are going to put that component and invite all the leaders now to step in as their coaching side, okay, it's not, and this is where we differentiate between coaching and therapy. We are not here to resolve the matter. So instead of fixing the problem or fixing the situation, draw out and call in the inner potential of the team members by communicating effectively, listening properly, and ask the right questions that will draw them in with you towards finding together the solution rather than positioning yourself as somebody who knows. It is actually the time where you have to actually open up, be vulnerable, and not act as the expert or the consultant or the therapist, okay? And just open up and explore together with the team members, pull their inner potential, see what they have to chip in, and let's see how we can co-create the future and co-create the solution as we move forwards.
Thank you, Yab. That's helpful. I have another question here as well that I think would like to pose out. One is that from Dalia, actually, as a leader and as a coach, how can you manage the stress when you yourself are stressed and concerned? So you're operating from, you know that you're in that state of stress, and then you are out there trying to support others. What is it that you need to be aware of for yourself in terms of where you are and perhaps what you need to do, and what might be some of the things we need to be aware of then? Oh, I'm gonna lean out to you, Pia, if I may.
Can you just repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, it's from Dalia. As a leader and as a coach, how can we help manage the stress when we ourselves are stressed and concerned? So we're already in that place. I mean, we're kind of looking after, I guess to some degree, we're asking the questions ourselves. How can we be there for others when we need to be there for ourselves to some degree?
Yeah. So, I mean, stress can be good to a certain point, right? It's when it becomes chronic or if it's constantly bombarding us that it's not healthy. You do need a certain amount of stress and adrenaline to keep you going in situations where your energy is needed. It's the running around, being constantly stressed, that's draining our energy. And this is where self-care comes in. Again, back to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because if you're not healthy and you're not practicing self-care, which by the way is not selfish, taking care of yourself in times of adversity is not selfish, it's actually needed, because otherwise you don't have the energy to face all of the different challenges and all of the demands that are put on you by your employees or your family or loved ones. So self-care, we spoke about mindfulness, doing things that take your mind off the stress. It could be painting, listening to music, reading, doing things that you're passionate about, hobbies. Let's face it, in this isolation, we have more than enough time to get into things that really nourish us, whether that's physical nourishment in terms of food and drink, or if it's spirit or mind or soul in terms of reading or poetry. But you have to practice a level of self-care and take the downtime to recharge in order to handle the stress. We were not meant to handle the stress 24/7. When we handled it in the cave ages, when we were cavemen and cave women, it came in spurts. And that's when we needed the adrenaline to get away from predators. that predator is now there all the time, especially right now with the COVID. And we need downtime, we need fire gazing, we need to just disconnect and just take care of ourselves first.
Can I add a couple of more notes there? Yes,
please
thank
go
you so
ahead.
much. Yes, thank you. In terms of the self-care, quite often is not a big thing that stresses us. The milk runs out, the coffee is not ready, the toast burns, and we are already stressed. And by the time we get to work, we are already stressed 6 or 7 out of 10 most of the times. My parking spot is taken. So we need to also pay attention from moment to moment. What am I feeling right now? How am I feeling? And if I'm feeling stressed on a scale of 1 to 10, where is my stress? So paying attention to these small things often helps us manage our stress so much better. Yeah, thank you.
That's really good. Thank you. That's a nice tool. So we're just shining the light on what's really happening here. Sometimes we're going into situations and we are not fully aware. We're in a state of heightened it's stress, and that then means we're not necessarily in a conscious control of our responses to what's going on. Even if someone comes up and says, "Hi, how are you?" we're already in a state of, well, you know. The response is it's not without the past that we bring with it. Great. Ihab, any thoughts on that on that area in terms of managing stress? Tim, I'll come to you in a short while with a new question, if I may.
Absolutely. When you're talking about leadership, the first thing that you look at is self-leadership, and definitely the concept is that you cannot give others what you already don't have. So the first thing that we need to connect is to connect with ourselves and dive in and see what's triggering that, and start working on our emotional intelligence. And once you're working on the emotional intelligence, it goes back to having that self-awareness, which Kamran has been talking about, is how you can raise that self-awareness and heighten it to an extent that you're able to see those triggers, no matter how small, but it's the accumulation that will cause this. And checking in with yourself and seeing those triggers and start working on what we opened up our discussion with, that presencing, that meditation, yoga, taking the time to reflect on how these incidents are affecting or impacting me. What are my responses? How can I change my responses towards them, and how I can actually avoid that emotional hijack and thus be present in the moment. And this is the point where you are connected and you start knowing how to react to things much better. So the first thing is to reflect inside, work on that self-awareness, and strengthen that emotional intelligence, which will allow to reflect on a better social intelligence when it comes to connecting with other people. And definitely at that point, we can talk about being positive catalysts of change or handling the situations around us.
Thank you, Tim. So we're going to come into our last couple of questions, I guess. But firstly, there's a question here from Nicole for you, Tim. What can we do to keep our teams engaged and productivity at an acceptable level? Now, I don't know what we mean by acceptable level here, but what do we need to do to refocus or to engage our teams when everybody's looking everywhere other than where they've traditionally looked from a business point of view?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nicole. Gosh, if I had the answer to that, I'd write it on a piece of paper and sell it for a lot of money. It's a hard one, isn't it? I mean, I think partly why is it a hard question? Because, you know, why are people engaged? Intrinsically, we've heard about this topic of know thyself, you know, understand what's driving you, what's making you anxious, what's your own self-awareness. And obviously, if you've got a team of people, that might be different for different people in that team. So when we're thinking about how do we engage a team, it's not always going to be the same answer for everybody in that team. What I do think, you know, going back to the point I made before about having some vision or some purpose for what you're trying to achieve, is a good way to align people. whether that's in times of quiet or in more particular in times of a great urgency and stress and anxiety, having that purpose of what the organization is trying to do is really, really important. And one way that you can get that shared alignment is kind of what we're doing now. I mean, the poll survey, Nick, that you put in there out to the group of people saying, okay, so you could imagine doing something that virtually with a team of people and say, okay, these are the 3 things at the moment that I think we should be working on, or these are the 10. Let's poll what people see as the most important one to be really focusing our time on at the moment. And there's a certain element of risk in doing that, because you're placing yourself in a vulnerability as the leader and saying, maybe I'm not sure exactly what we should be doing at the moment, but you can still retain your authority and say, I'm the leader. In the end, if we can't come to a shared view here of what should have the focus, then I'll decide. But let's get some shared perspective on that, and I think that creates alignment. So people will buy in much more if they feel part of the solution and part of the aligned purpose for an organization or for a smaller team going forward. So that's one of the ways that we can address this.
Great, thank you, Tim. Yeah, I think it's what you're saying there is how can we have a more full conversation with a much larger audience than perhaps we've traditionally had, and how do we empower people that have a viewpoint that perhaps have not had the opportunity to put that into the mix in the past, and how do we create the forums where that is now possible? And you rightly pointed out, I mean, something as simple as doing a poll of some sort gives a voice to people in the system. And maybe that's just one simple idea, and I'm sure there are 1,000 tools and apps that are available out there. I want to just, I'm aware of the time, and maybe I just pose one final question to the crowd, to the group here, and I think that comes down to, maybe we just want to bullet point from today, what does a leader, in terms of establishing their mindset, maybe just a couple of points each that they perhaps need to be aware of, that if they walk away with and an action, it's going to be of use to them given the current circumstances. Just thoughts for you, maybe start with you, Pierre, as we go around finally, just to close this off.
Yeah, so for me, that would be key skills for a leader right now: empathy, definitely, high emotional intelligence, and not falling into the trap of thinking that they are the hero or have to fix everything for everybody else. That they really truly lean in and be vulnerable, show that they're not perfect, and ask for help from others.
Great, thanks, Pierre. Tim, just quickly, maybe your thoughts, just to sort of wrap up what you felt come out today in terms of the key points for leaders in terms of mindset and their in again.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Pierre, on those. Love those points, so I won't repeat them. I suppose one of the topics we heard earlier is vulnerability, and as a leader, we're often in this balance between trying to have all the solutions and appear omnipotent and all powerful and go, follow me, this is the way, with the, hang on a minute, perhaps there are different ways that we could address this, and I'm going to need some support and help, and in the end, I'm going to support and lead the organization, but I want some, I want some shared buy-in, and that vision, I think, nourishes the team by having the alignment that you need to go through difficult times. So that's one I would add in addition to Pierre.
Great, thanks, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely, empathy will come at the top of the pyramid for me, and I would say calmness, confidence, resilience. These are key for us to lead in the way to show up as leaders, And this will allow us to translate it properly in the right channel of communication, which will ensure proper alignment to a higher purpose and our core values at this point of time. And then would definitely lead to higher motivation, because your alignment is going to reach to engagement, and engagement is going to allow more motivation, and motivation is going to cascade to performance. And I'm not going to specify what performance, because this is up to the leader, what kind of performance and what do they want to outline for the future.
Great, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that none of us are saying you've got to work harder and faster here, because that paradigm is broken. And I think maybe as we close off with you, Cameron, you know, in terms of what's shown up for you today, that's just an interesting point that I've certainly noted has shown up today.
Yes, for leaders for the VUCA world, balancing an agile mind and an open heart. That's, I guess, what sort of wraps it up for me, bringing this together.
Yeah. Yeah. So, firstly, I want to thank all of you that have joined us today. Really, the questions have been tremendous. We've really enjoyed them. There is potentially an opportunity for us to look at expanding this forum going forward. If that's something of interest to you, just drop us a quick note and let us know that. You know, just as I draw this up, certainly those key points around empathy, vulnerability, creativity, and that co-creation piece, those are sort of buzzwords that have shown up for me. I certainly don't believe that that's everything that's shown up, but any leader that can be curious and lean into those spaces is, I believe, someone that can really serve deeply at this point. And let's face it, that is something that is very needed. And we look forward to continuing this dialogue with you, both as individuals and organizations. And thank you for showing up today. Thank you for the panel members, Pia, Tim, Ihab, Cameron. Thank you so much for being here today. And with that, I'm going to sign off, and thank you very much for your time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.